first of all, it's the appropriate time. Second of all, people now have ears to hear. They have eyes to see, and by the grace of God, I believe that, it's time for those things to happen. I want to draw everyone's attention to my book, Xenogenesis. I was provided with the document. Doug, you wrote part of it, the box of chocolates, the introduction, but in the rainbow was God's covenant. This is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. The very fact that there are 6 colors in the rainbow that flashed upon the White House and around the world should tell you something. God's 7. I'm going to read this because I said this, Doug, the box of chocolates, and Will be is a friend of mine. He gave me permission to quote Mr. Langley, high-ranking CIA guy who called Will to his bedside before he died and told him some, I believe, the most earth-shattering information, and I use that word in its fullest context that I've ever read. This is critical for you all to understand. And I would say this, if you want to get it, because sooner or later you're going to get it, as a multi-star general in special operations said to me, sooner or later you will get it. Sooner or later everybody gets it. For most it will be too late. My prayer tonight is by the entrance of knowledge, by the entrance of wisdom, we're seeing the very images of Noah's flood. We're seeing and hearing of the destruction of the pre-flood giants and the post-flood giants. Now listen to this, my friend's account. This is in my book, Xenogenesis. I'm going to read it in its entirety. Those of you who have it, you might want to mark these pages down. One day out of the blue, Langley called me. He wanted to know if I was aware of chemtrails. His question caught me by surprise, as I had been aware of the unusual spraying of these man-made contrails for some time, but had never brought the subject up to him. Now listen to this. They are trying to remove the alpha and the omega, he told me. He told me that he had been involved during Vietnam War with the Blazer, B-L-A-Z-E-R project. Blazer had several compartments, some relating to weather modification over Vietnam, some with secure and encrypted communications, some with weapons technology, and some focused on experimental and rather dark and occult research. He told me that most of the Blazer work was cutting edge but pretty much standard operational use of frequencies and materials to encrypt messages and direct weather patterns. He was concerned, though, with the ramifications of the darker aspects of Blazer, primarily the attempt to tap into and manipulate the other dimensions or the spiritual realm. He described it like this. Think of a rainbow, all of the colors flowing together like a river. Now envision a river, all of that power being channeled towards the sea. The river has a path and a direction, and is held in check by the banks of the river. Imagine that the far bank is alpha and the near bank is omega. If either bank is overcome, the result is chaos, a flood. So the alpha and the omega, the banks, hold the power of the river in check. You can call it the river of life. I added that. I understand this concept. Now imagine, he continued, that the colors of the rainbow are different frequencies of energy, all being held in check by banks that are the alpha and omega frequencies. Remember, Jesus Christ himself is the alpha and the omega. In Colossians 1:16 and 17, I'm giving you the Bible verses. All things that are held together were created for him, in him, by him, and for him, and it's all held together by the word of his power. Okay. Banks, the 2 banks of the river are the alpha and omega frequencies. Life is orderly as long as these 2 frequencies are there and doing what they do. We often don't see rainbows, but God created the rainbow as a visible sign to us that he's in control of all of the forces of nature and the spirit on this planet. We appreciate it when we see a rainbow. It is somehow a spiritual comfort to us. All is well, so to speak. Now his tone became more serious and ominous. What they are working on, and it's very black ops, is a way to remove the alpha and the omega, the banks that hold all of this in check. This would allow the intermingling of forces that are all now kept separate from one another, forces that were not intended to be together and operating on the same dimensional plane of existence. It will be unleashing of chaos unto the earth. Now, Mr. Langley, again, CIA top guy, dying deathbed conversion and sharing with my friend Will, Consider the Alpha and the Omega to be the God force in the universe. When you think about it, God had been a real presence upon the earth. I mean that he literally walked with man upon the earth at the time of creation for some time after. Adam and his family saw God and interacted with him on a daily basis until their fall. Later, Enoch had a face-to-face knowledge of God and was taken by him after imparting godly wisdom, after God imparting godly wisdom to Enoch, and he was instructed to share with his descendants. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, there's 360, either 360 or 365 books of Enoch, of everything, you know, all the mysteries of the universe, and guess who controls those? We only have fragments of two different versions, and just partial versions of Enoch, but that's neither here nor there. Then God removed himself from direct contact with men. He still was involved with mankind, but not directly as we would consider it. He chose to interact with us in an unseen manner, except in those rare cases. Moses on the mountaintop and in the form of the Holy Spirit, depending upon Jesus in the form of a dove, when he wanted to remove all doubt of who he was. Sin had entered in with the act of Adam and Eve, allowing themselves to be deceived and turning against the will of God in the Garden of Eden. In effect, and on a spiritual level, they had stepped outside the boundaries that God had set for them. The result was chaos. Mr. Langley now had my full attention. And by the way, I know this person, Doug. I know this person, Joe, and I know this person, Tim. I have the highest respect for him, and all I can say is I can't say any more than that, but I have the highest respect for him, okay? When you view this in the context of science or alchemy, everything that came afterwards is understandable. Nimrod chose to allow himself to be influenced by and fully embraced by the dark forces. This led to his determination to build the Tower of Babel. This was the third attempt by dark forces or fallen angels to get humans to cooperate with them in their attempt to return to their former abode. There were giants in those days and after those days. Heaven and to finish their attempting at overthrowing God from his throne. The first attempt was in Eden. The second was in convincing Enoch to plead their case before God. The interim period after that was a time before the flood when the giants were born. The attempt was made to subdue the earth by force, to take the world that God had created for man. At Babel, the attempt to convince mankind to assist them in reasoning with God on their behalf was abandoned. The new strategy was to create a means to rise up and assault the gates of heaven. This required time and human technology. The fallen ones could not return to heaven on their own. They were banished in order to make their assault. They needed the willing participation of humans. Now it gets interesting. The decision by Nimrod to embrace the dark forces led his thoughts to build the Tower of Babel. Note that God took notice of this building project and decided to confuse the language of men and tear it down, the tower. If we do not do this, then nothing will be kept from them of what they conceive. Think about how unusual a thing that statement is. God is God. He can do whatever he wants, but the building of this tower was of concern to him. This is a striking statement. The tower represented something unique, a willing participation between fallen angels and God's creation for his pleasure. In agreement to assault the gates of heaven, God knew that he had a plan for the salvation of mankind, Jesus. Satan also knew this, and the satanic plan was to somehow unite willing humans with fallen angels in an attempt to return home. Now here it is. Towers, pyramids, mountains, all places of dark worship stood as reminders to humans that they were being directed to look upwards to the heavens. Patiently, these dark forces waited, suggesting to men new ideas and inventions, new technologies and innovations, the discovery of new materials and concepts that would eventually lead to today's information technology revolution, which is nothing more than a return to the Tower of Babel. Now, here's the thing. Our conversation went on for hours. If this wasn't so important, Doug, I wouldn't be reading the whole thing. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you ask me, tell me the most important thing, Steve Quayle, not the most hidden, not the most interesting. Well, this is probably the most interesting, but the most arcane. This is the most specific, amazing, timed release of information that I personally know. In other words, this blows my mind. Our conversation went on for hours that day and many other hours and many other days. The basic overview is this. Mankind has come to the point in history where he is technologically able to do most anything that he conceives of. With the explosion of the Internet and modes of travel, communications, breakthroughs, and innovations, all guided in some manner by dark forces, we stand at that place in time when the greater master plan of dark forces can be realized and acted upon. Most humans are not aware that the work has this greater purpose, and they willingly go about their research with blinders on. So I just want to finish this up. Our reward for this work is the praise of man, financial gain, and a higher standard of living, which causes us to seek after this type of gain, the result being our focus on the things of man rather than the things of God. As to the removal of the Alpha and Omega, Mr. Langley said, and he was convinced that the final chapter is about to be revealed. It has already been written in the book of Revelation that we are on the verge of witnessing the restraining walls between dimensions, the restraining power of the Holy Spirit being removed. This will not be accomplished by an assault on heaven, but by God's purposeful removal of the restraining spirit from the world. At this time, humans will have made a conscious choice as to which side they will serve, God or darkness. There will be a winnowing period, that's where we are right now, in which head knowledge of God and His purpose will be challenged as opposed to heart knowledge by an unimaginable time, here you go everybody, of violence and lawlessness. Violence and lawlessness. One of the names for the Antichrist is the man of lawlessness. Christians will not escape this time. In fact, it is for this very reason the refining of mankind that this short time of chaos will be allowed. But the battle is already won. Here's the great news. The battle is already won. The purpose of this time of trouble is to refine and purge out the impurities of mankind so that the perfect can come. In the meantime, we go about our lives in darkness, not seeing what is right in front of us unless we consciously choose to do so. Jesus told us, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end.